In this chapter, we're going to look at how we can create splines in more depth, how to create splines that match the shape you have in mind, quickly and cleanly. We'll then go on to edit those shapes, combine them with other hand-created shapes, split them apart, and so on. I'll also show you how you can use spline templates to quickly create a large number of different spline shapes. We'll look at how we can combine those shapes via hand editing and also by using the inbuilt Boolean system. We'll also see how we can quickly create outlines from those shapes and the issues that can arise from doing so. These skills are very important. After all, your end model is only going to be as good as the spline paths and shapes from which they're actually derived. But the spline tools in 3ds Max are very powerful, fast, and easy to use. And also the template spline shapes are also pretty comprehensive. So they often get us part of the way there from the start. So let's make a start by creating some basic spline shapes. And firstly, we'll just make a path. And my first piece of advice is you can actually create splines in any view that you want to, but it may actually make the most sense to create them in the top view because this actually reduces the issue down into a two-dimensional one. We're only working with 2 dimensions here. Generally, when you're creating paths for creating objects, or when you're creating shapes, you want them to be just 2D objects. You don't want any extra three-dimensionality coming in there because it can actually cause issues with a lot of the spline tools. So let me just first create a very basic shape. I'm just going to create some points here. And as we saw earlier in the DVD, the reason why this actually came out like this is because we had the initial type of the vertex to be set to be corner. And that means that every time we create a vertex, it's going to be a corner point. And that means that all of the segments in between are by default going to be linear. If I delete this spline and change the initial type to smooth, now we can draw away. And as you can see, it's using the automatic smooth type for the vertex instead. So we get this nice curvy line instead. So let me show you what the different types of vertex point are. If I just go into the modifier panel, I can now go into vertex mode, select any one of these vertices. You can see that we have a number of options. If I select these vertices and go to right click, you can see that at the moment the vertices are set to be smooth, and this is a kind of automatic smoothing algorithm, which means that the spline will always try and maintain a smooth curvature between the various vertices. Then we can change to corner, which will basically mean that if you can imagine, we basically have Bezier control handles here with no length and no direction. And that means that the curve comes in here in a very linear way. And effectively that means it will cause a corner. We also have Bezier, which is the standard Bezier curves where they're locked together, as you can see here. And I can change the directionality and the length of those vectors just by pulling on the control handle here. And we also have the option of having Bezier corner. So once this is selected, you can see that the two vectors aren't linked anymore and they become independent. And that means they can actually form a corner. If I put it back to being Bezier, you'll see that they actually snap together again because they're now linked once more. You can actually change it from being a Bezier vertex to being a Bezier corner just by holding down Shift and dragging one of the handles. And if we look now, you can see it's changed to being Bezier corner again. Let me just show you that again. As you can see, Bezier, hold down Shift, drag it, and it's now Bezier corner. So let me just create a spline again. And I'm just going to have it on corner. And if I go in here and I change these points to being Bezier, you'll see that there are various different relationships in the handle lengths here. You can see that the direction of the vectors is linked. As you can see, it's always a straight line, so the force goes in and out of the vector in a straight line. But you can actually see the length of that force is different. You can see it's actually longer in this direction than it is in this direction. And here it's pretty much equal. But again, you've got quite a big difference here. The easiest way to actually reset those is by selecting the vertex in question, right-clicking and saying Reset Tangents. That will then actually set the tangents to be the same length and also set the curvature so it's actually, as you can see here, so it produces a better kind of smooth curve going on here. You can actually get the same result by changing to smooth and then changing back to Bezier. And that will basically give you exactly the same result. You can see the result is that the two vectors have the same length. And you can see the same here. So let me just run through that again. Let's change these back to being a corner. We'll change them to being Bezier. As you can see, you've got an equal length in quite a few of these vectors. You can change them all using Reset Tangents. You can see now we've got equal curvature on any of these, which makes it easier to edit. As you can see here. And the other way of doing that is we could also, let me just put it back here to being corner. We could also change to smooth and then change to Bezier. And that has the same result as using Reset Tangents. So what we have here is a single spline object, a single editable spline. But we could actually create another one here. So let me just do that now. Just create a similar shape. And I could actually combine the two together quite easily. Let me just make this smooth and change that to Bezier. I can combine the two by using the options here. Let me just drag this out here just to give us a little bit more room. And you can see we have an attach option. If we click on that and click on this other editable spline, it'll actually attach the two together. Now if we go into sub-object mode, you'll find that, we have the usual collection of vertices and segments, but we also have two splines now, one here and one here. If we wanted to actually join these two together and make them into just one spline, we would actually get this vertex here, put it into a similar position to this vertex here, and then just select the two vertices and go down to the weld tool, which you can see is over here. Click on weld, and if the threshold is big enough, in other words, if the unit distance is close enough, let's just zoom in here. You can see they're not completely coincident, but if that value is big enough, it'll actually weld those two vertices together and they'll become one vertex. So let me just put up this value a little bit. Click on weld, and now they've become one vertex. You can see that when I did so, it actually kept the tangency of the handles. And that means that we've still got basically the same curve shape as it was before they were welded. But now if we wanted to, we could actually go here and say Reset Tangents. As you can see, it's set the two handles to be in the same length and lock them together. Now we can actually pull this out here. Actually, let me just change that to Bezier. It hasn't actually locked them. Now I can pull that out, produce a nice curved end to the line here. Obviously, this used to be the end and now it's the middle. So also now I can go here, click on spline. As you can see, it selects the entire thing. And that's because it's all connected together now. We can break the two objects apart by clicking on a vertex, clicking on break, and that then makes those two vertices into two vertices. Now you'll find that if we select all of these segments, we can actually move it, and you can see it's actually broken apart there. We can do that anywhere. Let's just select here, click on break. And you can see that when you actually break it apart, it still keeps the tangencies on the handle, so the spline shape doesn't actually change shape. But you can see that the vertices are actually broken apart there at that point. And you can also see the same there. Now we basically have three splines here because these are actually connected together, these are connected together, and these are connected together here. As I showed you earlier, once again, if I want to connect these together, I can just select all of the vertices if I was being lazy, and I could click on the weld button here. If I click on that, you can see it's actually welded everything together again. And if I actually put this to be too high, it could actually cause other vertices that you didn't want to weld together. But in most cases, it's perfectly fine as long as the vertices are basically on the same spot. Now if we click on spline, you can see we just have one spline again. Now, as we saw with mesh editing, we can actually break apart this object as well. So if I select some segments, let's say we select these here, I can go down here and I can choose detach. And you can choose to detach to a shape, say OK. And now if we click out of this object, you'll see that we actually have two objects in the scene. So as you can see, we've actually created a new object just by detaching off those segments here. We could go in here again. We could do the same thing down here. We could just detach those. And again, we've created another object, as you can see here. And again, it's just as easy to actually attach them all together again. But when you do so, remember that when you go in here and click on splines, there'll still be three separate splines. So it keeps that relationship, that kind of history that you've actually broken apart. And if you want to consolidate them all again, back into one spline, select the vertices, weld, and there you are, you're back to one spline again. And at this point, I want to show you an important feature, and that is that if we go into vertex mode, you'll see down here we've got show vertex numbers. If I turn that on, you can see that each vertex has a number associated with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on, all the way around to vertex number 14 here. Now, you may wonder how those vertex numbers come about. Well, it's to do with the first vertex in the spline, and you can see in this case, this is this vertex. If this spline was to be used as a path, it would mean that on the first frame of the animation, the object would start here at the beginning of the spline. And it's the beginning of the spline because this is where the first vertex is. This is effectively 0% along the spline. This is the last vertex on the spline, so this is 100%. And somewhere along the middle here, if we've got 14 steps, number 7 is 50% along the length of the spline. So we can actually change that relationship by changing which is the first vertex in the spline. So let me just go to number 14 here. And if you have a look in the dialog over here, you can see that there's a button here called Make First. So if we choose this button, click on it, you can see now that there's a box shape. Let me just do that again. And you can see that box shape has moved. That actually indicates what is the first vertex in a spline. And you can see that when you click on it, it makes it into the first vertex, and the vertex numbering changes along the length of the spline. That will have an effect on any kind of modeling that you do. If you use this spline as a path in a loft, or if you use it for other purposes, that will actually change the direction of the surface. And if it's used as a path for animation, it will mean that the animation will actually start at this end of the spline and traveling this direction, rather than traveling here and going in this direction. So the numbering of the vertices is important. It shows the direction of the surface. And as I said, you can change that order just by choosing a vertex and clicking on it, and that will actually make it first and change the ordering. Now, turning a shape into a closed shape is actually very easy. You just weld together the endpoints, as you can imagine. Just select it and weld it. And now if we change that to smooth, then we can say Bezier. So now we have a closed shape, and this will now form a loop. This is basically a loop, and something can actually animate around here. Now, we can actually change the first vertex just by clicking here or here. And you can see it actually renumbers the spline based on which vertex we choose as the first one. If I was to do this in an interactive way, you can actually join together the endpoints of a line just by clicking on it. So let me just draw some points here. And if I go here, there, it says, do you want to close this spline? We say yes, and it actually welds those points together for you. I can go in here now, and I can edit this. Let's just change it into smooth, and then Bezier. And it's very easy to actually join these two splines together to make them into one. All we need to do is basically compromise to lose one of these segments. We make a hole so we can attach them together. But to do that, we need to first attach the two things together. So let's just attach, pick this spline, attach that one. Then we can go in here and we can use the spline mode to select this here. I'll just move this into this position here. We're going to attach these two splines using this segment here. We just need to delete this segment from here, delete this segment from here, get these two vertices selected. We've got a very high weld threshold there, so we can just click and they get snapped together and welded. Do the same here. And there we are. We've joined the two shapes together. It forms a continuous loop as we had before. And we've kept basically the curvature at this point, although we did actually snap them together. But if we weren't lazy, we could actually just move the points together and do that in a more organized way. If we don't like the way that these are very angular now, we could just go in here, change it to smooth, and change that to Bezier. And we have a nice curve going on here now. So again, you can see it's very easy to edit splines and join them together and create other shapes. So let me show you combining two more shapes in a slightly more precise manner. Let's just create a rectangle here and create a circle. And I'm just going to attach these together. I'm just going to click on this rectangle, convert to editable spline, and then attach this circle. And I hold down Shift and drag over here to create a copy of it. And now I'm going to go in here and edit this one. Let's just go into vertex mode. I'm just going to zoom right in here. And I'm going to use this refine option here to put a vertex in at this point. As you can see, it pops when we did so. And we're going to put in another vertex kind of here. And let's do the same over here. Let's put in a vertex here. And also here. And now, just zoom out. We need to get rid of these segments. So we just need to get rid of that and that. That. And now we can select those vertices, weld them, select those, weld. We've combined it now into one spline, as you can see. There were issues though, we had that popping, and also it was actually quite fiddly. So let's have a go at that again here. And let me just shift drag this over here to create another copy. Just going to go in here and edit this. We've actually got a much better tool for the job at hand here, and it's called cross insert. What that does is it looks for where two splines are crossing, as you can imagine, and it inserts a vertex at those points. And it does it for both splines. So let's actually click there. As you can see, it's created the shared vertex. I'll do the same here. And you can see you can actually move around, and it only actually becomes active in an area where actually inserting makes sense, where there actually is a crossover. Now we can go down here. We can select those segments, delete them, then do the weld again. And we've basically got the same shape again, but a lot faster and a lot more efficient. But there's even another way to do it. So let's have a look at that. So we'll just go into sub-object mode here. We need to be in spline mode because we're working with, actually we're not in the right object here. We need to go into this object here. Well, we need to be in spline mode because we're actually going to be working with spline shapes. And these need to be closed shapes. If they're open, it's not going to work because we're going to actually use the Boolean tools here. Now, you may have seen Boolean tools in other software and in other parts of 3ds Max. Basically, what it does is it takes two volumes and then connects them together or subtracts them from each other using various algorithms. The usual combinations are the ones that you can actually see here. You have union, subtraction, and intersection. So let's just see what happens when we do this. We'll have this selected, click on Boolean. We're going to try a union here, click on here, and you can see it's actually done the modeling operation that we did over here in basically just one click. Very, very fast and easy to use. Let's just undo that. The second option, as you can see, is subtraction. So we need to select the first object, click on Boolean to make it active, select the second spline, and now it subtracts it from here. And let's undo that again. And then the third option, as you can see, it does the intersection between the two shapes. And before we finish off in this chapter, we'll have a look a couple of more features, but we're not going to look at every single feature of the spline tools because there are so many of them, and we just don't have time to look at them in this DVD. But I think we've got a pretty good idea of how things work here. So we'll just look at a few more features before we finish off. The first thing I want to show you is the outline tool, and that's pretty cool. It allows you to create an outline of the shape that you've currently got selected, the current spline, which you can see here. And you can see here's the outline option here. You can actually click on the object and drag to create the outline, as you can see. You've got to be aware that when you take an outline beyond a certain point, you'll start to get issues. As you can see, vertices in the new outline start to overlap each other. But as you can see, if we go outwards, we're going to get a pretty good outline no matter what we do. Generally, when you're using outline, you want to keep it so that it only creates a very small outline, as you can see here. Just right click to undo that. You can also do it using the spinners here. So I can just click on the spinner and move up and down and get the same kind of thing going on here. Obviously, that allows us to type in values like 2 or -2. So you can actually type in and produce outlines in a numerical manner. So it's actually a really useful tool. Why is it useful? Well, for instance, if you're creating certain shapes and you want to make a tube, then obviously you may want to have an outline. So if we created an outline of this, we can create a tube from that now by actually extruding this shape. Also, if we wanted to copy this, we can just hold down Shift and move it. Just do that. And that will actually make a copy within the same object. This isn't a separate object. This is just basically copy those splines. So you can see that it's just still one object. We go in, you can see that these are separate splines. We can also mirror things as well. So let's go down here. We got these mirror tools. You can see this is the axis. Mirror vertically. If we click on mirror, you can see it's actually mirrored those splines. So now we've created this nice symmetrical object here. If we chose this axis, we could mirror it in that direction, or we could actually do it in both at the same time, I believe. Just depends really what you want to do with your mirrors. So as you can see, pretty cool. Also, if you're working on a spline and you want to hide things temporarily, you have these hide buttons down here. That doesn't actually delete those objects, it basically just hides them temporarily. So we could just select these two splines and say hide, and then if we wanted to later, we can unhide them just by clicking on unhide all here. And as an example, if you wanted to create a bevel on this object, let's say you wanted to bevel this corner, make it a little bit rounder, there's two ways you can do it. You can either have a round bevel or you could have a linear bevel. But basically, both of them involve inserting at least one vertex. So we'll just go into vertex mode, turn on refine, just insert a vertex here, and we'll insert another vertex here, just doing this by eye. And then we can select these vertices, and I'm just going to move them down here. And you can see this is actually a Bezier here, so it's actually got this control handle pointing in this direction, creating this funny kind of S-curve. But we can very easily change that. We can just click here and say change that to corner. And that will actually give us the linear bevel that I talked about, as you can see. But if we wanted to create a nice round bevel here, the easiest thing to do is just to go right-click, Bezier corner. That gives us the Bezier handles, but doesn't actually change the actual curvature. And now we can go in and hand edit each one of these. So we just move this up here, move this to here. And again, this is just being done by eye. And I just need to make this a little bit smaller so I can grab the handle. Sometimes you find that this gizmo actually gets in the way of the handle, so you actually have to make the size a little bit smaller, or you can press X just to hide it completely. And then we go, just by editing those handles, we've now created a nice curved bevel at those points. So just by inserting vertices and then editing the types of curves that we have there, we can very easily add some bevels into shapes. Before we finish off, let's just look at the bevel again. Let's look at a slightly more complex scenario. Let's say we want to put a circle in here, and then I'll just shift copy that circle and go in, edit the radius of the copy. Just move this down here. Let's say we wanted to Boolean all of this together so it actually forms one shape. Well, something you'll find is that sometimes you need to have multiple copies of the splines that are going to be used in the Boolean, and that depends on how many times that particular shape is needed and how many different objects it has to Boolean with to produce the final object. So in this case, we basically have two separate sides here, and we need to Boolean the circle with this spline shape here. We also need to Boolean it with this spline shape here, with this object here, and with this object here. I would carry those out in that order, and that would give us a complete closed shape. And then what I would do is I would then Boolean out this circle from the middle of it all. So we need 4 copies of this circle. So we've got 1. Let's create 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll attach them together. We'll just go to here and attach and make sure we have these all attached. There we are. I click 4 times there to actually connect all of those circles together. And I'm just going to attach this one here. And now we should be able to actually Boolean all of these objects together. So first of all, let's take this shape here and we'll Boolean it with this shape here. So we'll just go into spline mode, select this spline, Boolean, and I believe we need union in this case. So we've got union selected, so we just need to choose the spline it's going to union with. There we go. So you can see now it's created a shape like this all the way around here. Just select this shape here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually subtract this circle from it, which will actually give us this shape here. So we'll just go down to here, Boolean. We've got subtraction turned on. So we just need to click on this circle. And there we are. We've got this shape here now, which will be used later to create another negative shape. We need to do the same thing over here. So I'm just going to select this shape, turn on Boolean, click on here. That gives us this shape here. And now if we click on this shape here, we want to actually combine this shape and this shape here. So we're going to go on Union, click on this shape, and it's now combined the two. We just need to get rid of the spline shape here, and there we are. We've got the shape that I wanted. You can see that this forms a continuous closed shape here. So quite a complex shape, and that's just using Booleans. So pretty cool tools there for creating quite a complex shape, really. So I think you should basically have a pretty good idea now how you can actually create splines. You can draw them out. You can then, if you want to, use some of these templates to draw out shapes. You can combine them together by hand editing or by using the Boolean tools, which are very fast and easy to use. And you can define areas of these splines to be linear or curved, and you can edit the control handles to actually control exactly what that curve is going to be. And in that way, you can create any kind of shape that you really need, really. In the next chapter, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some general principles that are used throughout all of the sort of spline modeling tools. And these can be used to guide you when you use the tools that we look at in the section that follows the next chapter in this DVD. So let's have a look at those particular items now.